Hi everyone, it's Zandile on the Miss Masombuga channel. I hope everybody is doing well. I'm great, thanks. So I'm just going to talk about some things that have interested me over the past week, and I'll see where this goes. I haven't really written out a script for this one. I'm just basically riffing and see how I feel about it. The first story is with regards to Dr. Nandipha. You're not allowed to be that beautiful and be a criminal. I'm sorry. I know that that's not how criminals work. I know that's pretty privileged, but I'm just gonna be the one to say it. You shouldn't be that beautiful and be a criminal. But seriously, anybody who's been following the story would know that she and Thabo Bester have been repatriated back to South Africa to face their crimes, and for Thabo Bester to continue with his original sentence. But Dr. Nandipha appeared in court with her father and some other accomplices from G4S, and they have not applied for bail. Her father had intended to apply for bail, and he was granted bail of 10,000 rand. And it brought up a topic that I remember from around the Oscar Pistorius area, when he had his whole thing going on. And that's when I actually realized that a lot of people don't understand bail. So I remember it was February 14, 2013, when the world woke up to the shooting of Reeva Steenkamp, and that was literally it. That was the story. But I remember I was driving to work and I was stuck in Johannesburg traffic at the time, and like most people, I was glued to the news. It was Radio 702 at the time, and I wanted to understand the hows, what, where's, why, all while logically knowing that there was probably absolutely no way of me ever definitively answering any of those questions. Most of them probably for the rest of my life. But the irrational part of me, it needed Oscar to not have done it. And as Radio 702 continued to report on the story, which was at that point, in all honesty, a non-story, I remember John Robbie kept asking the reporter on the scene what had happened, and the reporter was clear that there were no details as yet. All that the world knew at that point was that a young woman had lost her life and that Oscar had pulled the trigger. So we know where this goes, because this is the media, and the lack of an actual story doesn't mean that they can't create one. So Radio 702 reported that yes, details were scarce, but Oscar may have mistakenly shot Reeva because he mistook her for an intruder when he pulled the trigger. And within a few hours, that went from being a theory to being a probability, and eventually went on to be Oscar's defense. Because I think in our collective psyche, it's impossible for a blonde white man who's given so many hope because of his disability to suddenly become a murderer, and it was even more impossible for his victim to be a beautiful white woman. So I'm not saying that the 702 reporter sat down and crafted this whole story and what would end up becoming his defense, because I obviously don't know. But all I know is that within a few hours, this seemed to become the prevailing narrative that was being spun. I'm also not saying 702 created that narrative. I'm just saying that I first heard it from them immediately after the story broke. So after that happened, I would love to pretend that I still held any doubt. I fully believed he'd done it, and I did not believe that it was a mistake. So, as always happens with such stories, we're all glued to the facts, and since I'm a lawyer by profession, although I'm not practicing and haven't practiced in a while, people were very likely to ask for my opinion on his guilt and whatever the procedure was. And one particular question came from a very close friend of mine at the time who was stressed that Oscar would go free. So her question to me was, do you think he will go free? And my flippant response was, no man, he won't go free. So I later realized that she and I were actually having two very different conversations, because I was talking about the entire crime, but we were viewing the justice system differently. So let me step back, because it wasn't even then that I realized that a breakdown of bail was needed. It was much, much, much later when I joined Twitter, and I realized that there was a common problem when it comes to the justice system and the legal fraternity, as opposed to the public and the understanding of things like bail. So when I say that my friend and I were having two very different conversations, it's because I much later realized that when I said he won't get away with it, my friend later said to me, after he'd gotten bail, she said, you thought he wasn't going to get bail, so we can't really go with your legal knowledge now, can we? And it was at that point when I realized that her legal understanding of bail was what I know to be a common one now, where people believe that merely being arrested means that a person is guilty, and that the granting of bail means that they've gotten away with the crime and are seen to not be guilty by the law. What I was saying to my friend, on the other hand, was based on the legal framework of bail, where being arrested simply means that the police have found some kind of evidence that reasonably links you to the crime. So they reasonably believe that you could be connected to the crime. And the bail process is simply a process that secures your presence in court to answer for that crime. It has nothing to do with your guilt unless the evidence is insurmountable against you as the accused, which is not the case in most instances. So I was saying I believed Oscar would get sentenced for Reeva's murder. The bail outcome didn't matter to me. And being on Twitter, I realized that this is a very common misunderstanding of bail. And I think people don't understand how that can prove dangerous to not only victims, but the people who are wrongfully accused. So what exactly is bail? When an accused person has been read their rights and arrested for any crime in South Africa, they're allowed to apply for 3 types of bail, depending on the severity of the charge, the circumstance of each arrest, and who is presiding over the matter. So you get police bail, you get prosecutor bail, and you get an application in court, which is bail, the bail that's most known. Bail is governed by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the Criminal Procedure Act. Section 59 of the Criminal Procedure Act allows an accused to apply for bail at the police station, provided they aren't arrested for a serious offence, such as those contained in Schedule 2 of the Act. These would include theft under 2,500 Rand, common assault, and speed limit offences. That amount may have changed now. I haven't updated that specific portion of my knowledge. But to find out whether or not you qualify for police bail, you're allowed to ask the arresting officer what schedule and part your crime falls under, so that you can know if they can release you immediately on police bail. Prosecutor bail is obviously a higher form and allows for a prosecutor to authorize the release of an accused when the accused has been charged with a Schedule 7 offence, which is more serious than police bail. Examples include culpable homicide, robbery, theft, and fraud of amounts under 20,000 Rand. Court bail, however, is required in terms of Section 60 of the Criminal Procedure Act, and it is a must for Schedule 5 and Schedule 6 offences, which means that you can't get police and prosecutor bail for either of those. It involves a formal application to the court and is then made by submitting an affidavit, and or, as we saw in the Oscar application and what we'll probably see in the Nandipha Makutumana application, there'll be witnesses called to the stand. For their application, the accused must inform the court of any pending cases or previous convictions, because the court takes various factors into account before granting or rejecting that bail. Note that, as happened with the Oscar hearing, the court is authorized to postpone making a decision for a specific period after bail has been applied to. I think it's 7 days, but that time frame might have been amended legally. So there are 4 main considerations that the court takes into place when it makes its decision on granting court bail, although there can be other factors which are present depending on the actual circumstances regarding the crime. The first one is whether releasing the accused will endanger the accused themselves or any victims or any members of the public. This also includes whether or not releasing the accused will result in public disorder or undermine peace and security. In the Oscar scenario, the presiding magistrate found that the chances of this were relatively unlikely because Oscar was relatively well protected, and someone in his position would be unlikely to go out causing public issues without being recognized. With the Nandipha issue, I would argue that there is similar evidence that she probably wouldn't cause any harm to the public. But I do then think of the fact that this woman was taking bodies out of mortuaries, so I don't know what she's capable of. The second question is, if released, will the accused avoid their trial? This was especially relevant in the Oscar trial as he had many overseas avenues and ventures, and he had the financial means to skip the country. I don't know about Dr. Nandipha's financial standing. I don't know if she is still doing as well as she was purported to be. But the fact that this woman had to be repatriated from Tanzania just speaks for itself. I mean, of course she's a flight risk. If she could do it once, she could do it again. And then the third question is whether the accused will influence or intimidate witnesses or tamper with evidence. I don't know if she would. I think she's capable of anything. And then the fourth question is, will the accused undermine or endanger the functioning of the justice system, including the bail system? May I just remind everyone that this woman was out there violating dead bodies and helping to break out dangerous criminals. I'm not saying she would, I'm saying I believe she would. But all a magistrate needs is for one of these above points to be true or valid in order for them to refuse bail. Note that there's no mention of guilt, and that's for a reason. If your bail is denied, you can't then apply again unless there's new information, but you can appeal the verdict. If, however, bail is granted, the accused has to be present at every single court appearance, and if they miss any of them and have no valid excuse, bail can be revoked and the accused arrested on a further charge of contempt of court. So finally, when bail is granted, an amount is set that the accused must pay. That's the 10,000 Rand in the case of Dr. Nandipha's father. This also has nothing to do with guilt or whether or not they have a strong case. All that's taken into account is basically how much the accused can't afford to lose so that they aren't encouraged to skip court. Because bail amounts are returned after the trial is finished and the accused has been found guilty or not guilty of whatever crime they're accused of. So right now, Dr. Nandipha's father, Zolile Cornelius Segeleni, has been granted bail of 10,000 rand. I'm not really sure what is happening with the state's case for this man. I'm not saying that I think he's guilty. I'm just a bit confused, but maybe it's because I haven't read deeply into it and I need to do a little bit more research. But it was just quite interesting because I was thinking of what happens when the public not only misunderstands bail, but also litigates via social media. So for this, we can go back to the Oscar scenario. See, in the Oscar scenario, although much of the public believed that he may have done it, Oscar had the financial protection to actually insulate himself and his loved ones from unsubstantiated judgments because he's got the financial means. But on October 26, 2015, Orlando Pirates and South African national team goalkeeper Senzo Meyiwa was murdered in a convoluted and messy crime that has had more twists and turns than I can cover on here. The crime sent shockwaves and outpourings of sympathy and outrage at the high rates of crime in our country. Significant to this story is the fact that Zamugu Mbatha was arrested a few days after the murder, and the public and families affected, as well as the media, were comforted that justice would be done swiftly, as Meyiwa deserved. I may not get why the hell he was there, but he didn't deserve to die for it. So a few weeks later, in November, the Boksburg Magistrates Court then dropped all charges against Mbatha because there was no evidence to even book him for the crime in the first place. And I'd be shocked if most people really even remember his name. However, 7-8 years later, Mbatha's life remains in absolute turmoil because of that one association where he was judged because he had dreadlocks. He was fired from his job, he had to leave his home, he lost his partner, and hasn't even been associated with any crime, let alone this one, since 2015. The people in his community still see him as the guy who ended Senzo's life and think he got away with it because he paid people off, because he has money which his lawyer denies and says that image is only possible because his attorneys have remained fighting for him even though he doesn't have the resources, and the state is frustrating the finalization of his claim against it for a wrongful arrest. He hasn't been mentioned in the media for almost 7 years, but that association has left his life in turmoil, and that's only because people believe an arrest means that you are guilty, despite the court itself stating that the state didn't have enough evidence to arrest him. There are also 5 men currently being prosecuted for the crime, yet this man's life is still in turmoil because of that one association after that one arrest. Anyway, I hope that, if anything, this information at least allows people to understand the value and purpose of bail, and that even in cases where we are rightfully angry and concerned and want justice, we can understand that the legal system works in a specific way for a reason. Or we can revolt. Revolution is also an option. But anyway, let's not push that. Thanks for watching. I'll do the next stories in another video because this became much longer than I thought it would be. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe if you like the video, and let me know your thoughts. Catch you on the next one. Bye.